What happens when the very people who should protect you are the ones who sell you for profit? For Elara Thorne, life as an Omega in the Blackwater Pack meant invisibility. She was the smallest, the quietest, the one whose presence barely registered in a world ruled by strength and dominance. Born to Beta parents who looked at her with something between disappointment and resignation, she learned early that her existence was a burden they barely tolerated. Her two older sisters, Serena and Vivian, were everything she was not. Powerful, beautiful, destined for high-ranking mates. They treated Elara like a stain on the family name, a genetic mistake that made them question their own standing. But when her 18th birthday arrived, and the Harvest Moon ceremony brought an offer from the rival Shadowfang Pack, a trade, they called it, a political alliance sealed with an Omega bride, her sisters smiled for the first time in her presence. They smiled because they knew. They had arranged it all. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. The ceremony hall blazed with torchlight, casting dancing shadows across the assembled packs. Elara stood in the center of the sacred circle, her thin ceremonial dress doing nothing to shield her from the weight of hundreds of eyes. The scent of anticipation hung thick in the air. Honeyed excitement mixed with the metallic edge of bloodlust. Pack ceremonies were entertainment, as much as tradition, and everyone sensed tonight would be memorable. Alpha Dominic Blackwater stood at the high podium, his massive frame radiating authority. His scent rolled across the gathering, forest and embers, ozone and steel. The unmistakable signature of unquestioned power. Beside him stood Marcus Darkwood, Alpha of the Shadowfang Pack, a man whose reputation for cruelty preceded him like a shadow. The alliance between Blackwater and Shadowfang has been sealed, Dominic announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. As is tradition, an offering has been made. Elara Thorne will join the Shadowfang Pack as recognition of our bond and mutual respect. Elara's hands trembled. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the worn stone beneath her feet. This was survival. She had learned long ago not to fight what she couldn't change. If the Moon Goddess had fated her to this path, she would walk it. At least in Shadowfang territory, she might be far enough from her family's contempt to breathe. But then she felt it. A pull. A golden thread that seemed to weave itself through her ribcage and tug, insistent and undeniable. Her wolf, so quiet she sometimes forgot it existed, suddenly stirred with an urgency that made her gasp. Pui! Her head snapped up, and her eyes locked with Alpha Dominic's. For a fraction of a second, the entire world fell away. Time stopped. The bond snapped into place with such force that she stumbled, catching herself against the ceremonial pillar. She felt it. The connection, ancient and absolute, singing between them like starlight made tangible. Dominic's eyes widened. His nostrils flared as he caught her scent. Lavender, morning dew, wildflowers after rain. And she watched his pupils dilate. He felt it too. The mate bond, the one thing that transcended pack politics and power structures. The Moon Goddess herself had chosen them for each other. Her heart soared. For the first time in her life, hope bloomed in her chest. A mate bond meant protection. It meant belonging. It meant, I reject this bond. The words cut through the hall like a blade through silk. Dominic's voice was cold, flat, absolute. I, Alpha Dominic Blackwater, reject you, Elara Thorne, as my mate. I sever this connection by the authority granted to me by the Moon Goddess and witnessed by this gathering. The ceremonial words carried weight beyond sound. Elara felt the bond, so new, so fragile, begin to tear. It started as a pulling sensation in her chest, then became pressure, then transformed into agony, unlike anything she had ever known. It felt as though someone had reached into her ribcage and was slowly, deliberately ripping her heart in two. She collapsed to her knees, a scream tearing from her throat. The physical pain of bond severing was legendary, whispered about in cautionary tales, but no story could have prepared her for this. Her wolf howled in anguish, a sound only she could hear, the keening wail of something fundamental being destroyed. "Guards," Dominic said, his face a mask of indifference. "Remove her from pack territory. The agreement with Shadowfang is void. We will negotiate new terms." Ilara tried to breathe, tried to understand. Through the haze of pain, she looked up at him. "Why?" The word came out broken, barely audible. His lip curled. "You think I would bind myself to an Omega? I am destined for greatness, for an alliance that strengthens my power. You are nothing. A political pawn we no longer need. Your scent makes you passable for ceremony purposes, but as a mate, you would weaken everything I've built." A wave of power washed over the room as he reinforced his rejection with his alpha command. Ilara felt the last threads of the bond shatter, the severing complete. The emptiness that filled the space where the connection had been was somehow worse than the pain. A void so vast and cold, it threatened to swallow her whole. "Father, please." She turned her desperate gaze to her parents in the crowd. Her mother looked away. Her father's face remained stone. "You are no longer our concern," her father said quietly. "The deal with Shadowfang was your value to this family. Without it—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Serena stepped forward, her beautiful face twisted with false sympathy. "Oh, little sister. Did you really think you mattered?" The scent of her satisfaction, sharp and sickly sweet, filled Ilara's nose. "We arranged this months ago. Shadowfang offered good money for an Omega bride. Money we needed. And when Alpha Dominic approached us about wanting a mate who would look the part but never challenge him, well, 2 birds, 1 stone. You sold me?" Ilara whispered. "Tried to," Vivian added with a laugh. "But you couldn't even get that right, could you? Imagine ruining your own sale by being his mate. How inconvenient for everyone." The guards hauled Ilara to her feet. Her legs wouldn't support her weight, so they dragged her, her feet scraping across the stone. The assembled wolves watched in silence, some uncomfortable, others openly entertained. This was pack law. The Alpha's word was absolute. They threw her beyond the territory markers as the first snow of the season began to fall. The boundary was marked by ancient stones, and crossing them while severed from your pack was essentially a death sentence. Rogues, wolves without pack bonds, rarely survived more than a few months. The isolation drove most mad. The lack of pack protection made them vulnerable to everything from other packs to simple exposure. Ilara lay in the snow, unable to move, unable to care. The physical pain had receded to a dull roar, but the emotional devastation was absolute. She had lost everything in the span of minutes: her mate, her pack, her family, her future. The snow fell harder. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes? Hours? The cold slowly seeped into her bones. And some distant part of her mind recognized that hypothermia was setting in. Good, she thought. At least it would be quick. Her wolf, so newly awakened by the mate bond, whimpered once and fell silent. Ilara closed her eyes. The blizzard raged with supernatural fury, as if the moon goddess herself was angry. Ilara had managed to crawl, she didn't remember how, to a half-collapsed barn about a mile from the pack boundary. The structure offered minimal shelter, 3 walls and part of a roof, but it was better than the open field. She huddled in the corner, her ceremonial dress soaked through, her lips blue, her fingers numb. The emptiness in her chest where the mate bond had been was a gaping wound that made every breath an exercise in agony. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. Her vision kept blurring. This is it, she thought with strange calm. This is how I die. Alone, unwanted, unmated, the universe's greatest joke. She thought about fighting, about trying to shift and use her wolf's warmth to survive. But her wolf was as broken as she was. The rejection had shattered something fundamental. They couldn't shift. They could barely breathe. I'm sorry, she whispered to the wolf spirit inside her, to the moon goddess, to whatever force had thought it was a good idea to make her exist in the first place. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. Her eyes drifted closed. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That was bad, she knew. Some survival instinct screaming at her, that numbness meant she was dying, but the knowledge felt distant and unimportant. The darkness welcomed her. Somewhere in the void, she heard growling. Low. Rumbling. Getting closer. Rogues. Probably. Drawn by the scent of blood and weakness. She should be afraid. She couldn't summon the energy. Then warmth, sudden and shocking. Fur against her skin. Not attacking. Surrounding. Protecting. She forced her eyes open a fraction. Massive shapes filled the barn, wolves far larger than any she had ever seen. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. Not the typical amber of pack wolves, but silver, like moonlight given form. 1, 2, 3. She tried to count them, her mind struggling through the fog. 4, 5, 6. They pressed close, their body heat driving away the lethal cold. 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 wolves, each the size of a full-grown grizzly bear, formed a living wall around her. Their scent, aged oak, winter snow, pine, storm, filled the space, and with it came something else. Power. Ancient, overwhelming power that made the air thick and electric. You're real, she breathed. The prophecy. The old story her grandmother had told her once, dismissed as fairy tales. The Unchained. The legendary guards who served the true rulers of their kind, who waited through ages for their sworn sovereign to rise. The largest wolf, coal-black with silver markings across his face, shifted. The transformation was fluid, controlled. Nothing like the painful partial shifts she'd seen from struggling new wolves. One moment, a massive beast. The next, a man. He was scarred, heavily. His face looked like a battleground map, pale lines crisscrossing his features. His hair was dark and shot through with silver at the temples. His eyes, still glowing with that unearthly light, fixed on her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. "We've been waiting for you," he said. His voice was deep, rough, the kind of voice that commanded without trying. He removed his cloak, where it came from she didn't question, and wrapped it around her. The scent of aged oak and winter snow intensified, and she realized it was his. "I'm nobody," Ilara managed. "You're mistaken." A hint of a smile touched his scarred face. "You are Ilara of the Forgotten Bloodline, and we have been searching for 300 years. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she was just an Omega nobody wanted. But consciousness was slipping away again, the cold and shock and bond severing taking their toll. The last thing she felt before darkness claimed her was being lifted. Cradled against a chest as solid as stone, carried into the storm by someone who called her by a name she didn't know she had. The last thing she heard was his voice, quiet but absolute. "You're safe now. I swear it on my life." She woke to firelight and warmth and the unfamiliar sensation of being safe. The room was carved from stone, ancient and solid, with a fireplace that blazed with heat. She was on a bed, an actual bed with furs and blankets, and someone had changed her into dry clothes. Her ceremonial dress was gone, replaced with soft wool pants and a tunic that smelled like pine needles and mountain air. She sat up slowly, her body aching, but no longer frozen. The emptiness in her chest remained, the void where her mate bond should have been, but the sharp, immediate pain had dulled to a persistent throb. "You're awake." The scarred man from the barn sat in a chair by the fire, watching her. In the light, she could see him properly. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe in his 40s, with the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. Authority radiated from him like heat from the flames. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "The sanctuary, ancient territory, unclaimed by any modern pack, protected by laws older than the current pack structure. You're safe here. No alpha can touch you, no pack law applies." She processed this slowly. "Who are you?" "Kyle Stormborn, commander of the Unchained." He gestured to the door. "My brothers are outside. All 10 of us have served the same purpose for centuries, to protect the heir of the true bloodline." "I don't understand." Alara pulled the blankets tighter. "I'm an Omega. I'm nothing special. You've made a mistake." "Have I?" Kyle leaned forward, his silver eyes intent. "Tell me, Alara, have you ever wondered why your wolf felt so distant? Why you could barely shift? Why your senses, while better than humans, were dampened compared to even other Omegas?" She had. Of course she had. "I was told I was weak. You were bound." A new voice made her jump. An elderly woman entered, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. Her eyes were clouded with age, but they held the same silver glow as Kyle's. "Forgive me, child. I am Vera, keeper of the old knowledge. And I'm sorry, but we must have difficult conversations immediately. The prophecy is very specific about timing." "What prophecy?" Vera settled into a chair with a sigh. "The one your grandmother knew. The one she tried to tell you before she died. The one your parents killed her to silence." The room tilted. "My parents? What?" "They didn't want you to know," Vera said gently, "because knowing meant you would eventually claim your power. And your power threatened everything they'd built their lives on. Status, position, approval from stronger wolves. So when you were 3 days old, they hired a dark practitioner to bind your wolf, to lock away your true nature so deep you'd never find it." "But I have a wolf," Alara protested weakly. "You have an echo," Kale corrected. "A shadow of what you should be. The binding allowed you enough wolf to survive, to register as pack, but nothing more. Your true self has been caged your entire life." Alara's hands shook. "Why? Why would they do that?" Vera pulled out a small leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. "Because of this. The prophecy of the Forgotten Queen, written 700 years ago by a seer, blessed by the moon goddess herself." She opened the book and began to read, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality. "When the long winter ends and the false kings bow, the daughter of shadows will rise from snow, rejected and broken, sold by her blood. She wakes to her birthright in tear and in flood. She who was least shall be greatest of all. Her howl will shatter the proud and the tall. Marked by the moon with eyes of dawn's fire, she comes when the people have lost their desire. 10 who are faithful shall guard her ascent. Through ages they've waited, their purpose cement. And she shall be called by her true name at last, the matriarch risen from shadows long past." The words hung in the air like a visible spell. Alara felt something stir in her chest, not where the mate bond had been, but deeper, older, as if the poem itself was a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. This can't be about me. But even as she said it, the denial rang hollow. Rejected and broken, Cale said quietly. Sold by her blood. Those are your sisters. Rising from snow. We found you dying in a blizzard. Every line fits, Ilara. We've been watching your pack for months, waiting for the signs. When we felt the surge of power last night, the spike of magic that happens when a forced binding begins to break, we knew. We ran. The rejection, Vera added, that's what shattered the binding. The magic holding your wolf captive was tied to your emotional state, to keeping you docile and submissive. But the mate bond, even forming for just moments, created a surge of energy strong enough to crack the spell. And when it was severed, that trauma, that agony, it shattered the rest of the binding completely. Your parents' worst fear came true. In trying to protect their status by having you rejected, they freed you. Ilara's breath came short and fast. I don't feel powerful. I feel empty. Because your wolf is waking up, Kyle said, and she's angry. She's been trapped for 18 years, Ilara. When she fully emerges, you're going to feel it. Everything you should have been, everything you were denied, it's all coming back. As if summoned by his words, something moved in Ilara's chest. Not the void left by the mate bond, but something else entirely. A presence, massive, ancient, furious. Finally, a voice said in her mind, clear as crystal, strong as iron. Finally, you hear me? Ilara gasped. She'd never heard her wolf speak, not clearly. Most wolves communicated through impressions, emotions, vague pushes toward action. This was different. This was another consciousness, fully formed, intelligent, separate yet unified. Who are you? Ilara thought back. I am you, the real you, the one they tried to kill. The wolf's voice carried centuries of rage and loneliness. I am the matriarch's beast. I am the storm they feared, and I am done hiding. The room began to shake. It's starting, Vera said urgently. Cale, get the others. She needs to be outside. Cale moved with startling speed, and suddenly hands were helping Ilara up, guiding her through corridors she barely registered. The stone structure opened onto a vast courtyard, surrounded by ancient pillars, open to the night sky. The moon hung full and brilliant above them, its light seeming to pulse with meaning. The 10 members of the Unchained formed a circle around her, all in human form, all watching with expressions of awe and readiness. Let her out, Kyle said softly. Don't fight it. Trust yourself. The presence in Ilara's chest surged. Power, raw, primal, overwhelming, flooded through her veins like liquid fire. Every nerve ending blazed to life. Her senses expanded explosively. Suddenly, she could smell everything. The distinct scent of each guard, the snow on the mountains, the creatures moving in the forest miles away. She could hear heartbeats, breathing, the whisper of wind through distant trees. The world became crisp and detailed in a way that made her previous existence seem like she'd been living underwater. Now, her wolf commanded. Shift. The transformation was nothing like the stories. There was no pain, no snapping bones and tearing muscle. Instead, her body flowed. That was the only word for it. She felt her bones reshape themselves with liquid grace, felt her muscles expand and strengthen, felt fur emerge from her skin like snow forming on a winter morning. But it didn't stop. She kept growing. And growing. The shift that should have taken seconds stretched into minutes as her form expanded beyond any normal wolf's size. Power erupted from her in visible waves, silver light radiating outward and making the guards shield their eyes. When it finally finished, Ilara stood in her true form for the first time in her life. She was massive, easily twice the size of any alpha wolf she'd ever seen, possibly larger than that. Her fur was pure white, seeming to glow with its own internal light, and when she looked down at her paws, she saw they were tipped with claws that gleamed like polished silver. She could feel the power thrumming through her, infinite and ancient, as natural as breathing. "Look up," her wolf instructed. Ilara lifted her head and caught her reflection in the polished surface of one of the pillars. Her eyes were gold, not amber, not the yellow of normal wolves. True gold, brilliant and burning with an otherworldly fire. "We are beautiful," her wolf said with satisfaction. "We are what we were meant to be." Ilara threw her head back and howled. The sound that emerged was no ordinary wolf's cry. It was resonant, layered with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible. The howl rolled across the landscape like thunder, shaking the ground beneath them, sending snow cascading from the surrounding peaks. Every wolf within 100 miles would have heard it and felt its power rattle in their bones. The Unchained dropped to their knees as one, their heads bowed. "She is risen," Kyle said, his voice thick with emotion. "The matriarch walks among us again." Ilara felt tears, impossible in wolf form, but they fell anyway, streaked down her muzzle. For the first time in her life, she felt complete, whole, powerful, real. The emptiness from the severed mate bond was still there, still ached, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. She was more than someone's rejected mate. She was more than her family's shame. She was more than an Omega who didn't matter. She was the matriarch, and her story was just beginning. The days that followed blurred into a routine that felt like being remade from the ground up. Every morning, Kale met her in the training courtyard as the sun rose. "Again," he would say, no matter how many times she'd already shifted, how many times she'd held her form, how many times she'd practiced returning to human shape with control instead of collapsing in exhaustion. "Your power is raw," he explained the first day, watching her shift back and immediately stumble. "Like a child who suddenly has adult strength. You need to learn control before instinct." So she practiced, shift after shift after shift. At first, the transformations took minutes and left her drained. By the end of the first week, she could shift in seconds and hold her form for hours. By the second week, it was as natural as breathing. But shifting was only the beginning. "Feel the pack bonds," Vera instructed one afternoon, sitting across from Ilara in the meditation chamber. "You're not just a powerful wolf child. You're a matriarch. That means something specific. Feel outward." Ilara closed her eyes and extended her awareness. At first, nothing. Then, like ghostly threads becoming visible, she felt them. Connections. Thin, tentative links to the 10 guards. They weren't mate bonds or family bonds. They were something else entirely. Pack bonds, but deeper, older, voluntary, yet unbreakable once formed. "I feel them," she whispered. "All 10. Now push gently," Vera coached. "Send them comfort, safety." "Strength." Ilara concentrated, imagining the feeling of warmth and protection, and pushed it along the threads. From around the sanctuary, she heard gasps, sighs of relief. The bonds glowed brighter in her mind's eye. "That's the Alpha Command," Vera said with satisfaction. But where an ordinary Alpha forces obedience through dominance and fear, a true matriarch leads through empathy and strength combined. Your pack follows because they choose to, because you make them better. Never forget the difference. The abilities kept revealing themselves, one after another. She learned she could sense emotions through scent, with perfect precision. Not just basic feelings, but complex emotional states. Fear, but also the flavor of that fear. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of abandonment. Anger, but also its source, righteous fury versus petty spite. She discovered she could heal. Not dramatically, not like magic in children's stories, but when one of the guards, Marcus, a huge man with a booming laugh, cut his hand during training, Alara felt pulled to him. She placed her hand over his wound, felt energy flow from her to him, and watched the cut knit together in seconds. The matriarch is life itself, Vera explained. Where she walks, the pack thrives. Sickness flees. Injuries mend faster. Even the land responds. Watch. She pointed to the courtyard where Alara had first shifted. New grass was growing there, in the middle of winter. Impossible and green and vibrant. But perhaps most startling was the command ability. Not the empathic pack bonds, but something sharper. Try to make me kneel, Kyle said one evening during combat training. I won't force you. You need to learn this, he interrupted firmly. In battle, you'll face enemies who won't stop unless you stop them. You need to know you can. Try. I give you permission. Reluctantly, Alara reached for that well of power inside herself and pushed out with intent. Kneel. Kale's legs buckled instantly. He went down hard, his face shocked. Moon's mercy, he breathed. I couldn't resist. I wasn't even tempted to resist. Does it hurt? She asked, horrified. No, it feels... He searched for words. Like the most natural thing in the world. Like obeying you is what I was born to do. He stood again, shaking his head in wonder. That's the difference between Alpha Command and Matriarch Command. Alpha's force. You inspire. Even compelling obedience, it doesn't feel like violation. It feels like coming home. Each of the guards trained her in something different. Rin, quiet and deadly, taught her to move silently despite her massive size. Theron taught her combat strategy, how to read a battlefield, how to direct forces. Cassian, who had a gift for words, taught her politics and persuasion. Dorian taught her the old laws, the ones that predated the current pack system. They became her family. Not bound by blood, but by choice, and prophecy, and mutual respect. They teased her when she stumbled, cheered when she succeeded, sat with her in the evenings, and told her stories of the old world, before the bloodlines were forgotten and the matriarchs faded into myth. You were never like this, Alara said one night, sitting with Kyle by the fire. This warm. This patient. When you first appeared, you seemed so... cold. We've waited a long time, he said simply. 300 years. My brothers and I have walked the earth searching. We couldn't let ourselves feel too much. Hope was dangerous. Attachment to anyone outside our brotherhood was dangerous. But you're what we've always been waiting for. You make it safe to feel again. She studied his scarred face in the firelight. Were you ever tempted to give up? Every day. His smile was sad. But the prophecy was clear, and we'd sworn an oath. The Unchained served the matriarch in this life and all others. We couldn't quit even if we wanted to. And now? Now I'm terrified, he admitted. Because you're real. You're here. And the world is going to come for you. The current alphas won't want to surrender power. The old families won't want their secrets revealed. Your own pack will want you dead to prevent what you represent. And he stopped, jaw tight. What? She prompted gently. I'll tear the world apart before I let anyone hurt you again. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. That's not pack bond talking. That's not prophecy. That's me, Kyle, telling you that you've become precious to me in ways I don't fully understand yet. And that scares me more than any battle." A wave of power washed over the room, unintentional, her emotional response triggering a physical reaction. The fire flared brighter. The air grew warmer. The thread connecting her to Kyle glowed in her mind's eye, shifting from silver to gold. "Oh," Vera said from the doorway, her cloudy eyes twinkling. "That's interesting." "What?" Alara asked, though she thought she knew. "The chosen bond," Vera said, satisfied. "Not fated like a mate bond, but deeper in some ways because it's voluntary. The matriarch doesn't need fate to tell her who belongs at her side. She chooses. And when she chooses, the bond forms naturally, built from trust and respect, and..." She smiled. "Other feelings." Kyle's scent had shifted, Alara realized. The winter snow and aged oak were still there. But now there was something new, something warm and golden and right. The emptiness from the rejected mate bond didn't fill exactly, but it hurt less. She wasn't incomplete. She was choosing her own path. "We don't have to name it yet," Kyle said quietly. "You've been through too much to rush into anything. But Alara, I want you to know. I see you. Not the prophecy, not the power, but you. And whatever you need, whatever you want, I'm here." She reached out and took his scarred hand. The contact sent warmth racing up her arm, the chosen bond humming approval. "Thank you," she whispered, "for waiting, for finding me, for seeing me." Time passed. Days turned to weeks. Her power solidified, her control refined, her confidence grew. She was no longer the broken Omega who'd been thrown in the snow to die. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd been rejected and sold. She was Alara, matriarch of the true bloodline, and she was ready for what came next. The scout arrived on the night of the new moon, crashing through the forest in blind terror, his scent sharp with panic. Alara felt him cross into sanctuary territory, through her bond with the land itself, a new ability that still startled her, and she was in the courtyard before he fully materialized from the trees. He was young, barely out of adolescence, and he collapsed at her feet, gasping. "Please, please, Mercy, I didn't know, I swear, I didn't know." "Breathe," Alara commanded gently, and his panic eased slightly, her power instinctively calming him. "Who are you?" "Finn, Blackwater Scout. I was doing perimeter check and I saw..." His eyes went huge as he finally looked up at her properly. Even in human form, her power was visible now, a faint silver glow beneath her skin, her golden eyes impossible to miss. "Moon's Mercy. The legends are true. You're real." "Yes." She knelt to his level. "What did you see?" "A war party. 25 wolves. Alpha Dominic leads them. They're headed here. Someone told him you survived. Someone told him about the prophecy. He's coming to finish what the rejection started." The Unchained materialized from the shadows, all 10 forming a protective circle. Kyle's hand went to the sword at his hip. "When?" "Hours. Maybe less. They're moving fast." Alara felt the information settle into her, felt her wolf rise to meet the threat. For weeks, she'd been waiting for this, preparing. She'd known that confrontation was inevitable. The old power structure couldn't allow her existence. Every alpha who'd clawed his way to the top through force and cruelty would see her as a threat to everything they'd built. But she wasn't afraid. She was angry. "Let them come," she said quietly. The words carried power, made the air vibrate. "Send word that we'll meet them at the Standing Stones. Neutral ground. Witnessed ground. Tell Alpha Dominic that if he wants to end this, we'll end it properly." Finn gaped at her. "You're going to fight him?" "All of them." "No," Alara said, and smiled. It was not a kind smile. I'm going to give them a choice, and if they choose poorly, then yes, we'll fight. The standing stones stood in a clearing that had been sacred ground for 1,000 years, massive pillars of rock arranged in a circle. The full moon hung above them. The new moon had passed during the journey, and its light seemed to pool in the clearing like liquid silver. The Blackwater war party arrived exactly at midnight. 25 wolves, all in battle form, ranging from beta soldiers to high-ranking enforcers. And at their head, massive and radiating authority, Alpha Dominic Blackwater himself. His fur was dark gray, almost black, and his eyes burned amber. Even in wolf form, his arrogance was palpable. Behind him, Elara noted with a surge of vicious satisfaction, stood her sisters. Serena and Vivian had shifted as well, their glossy coats perfect, their poses elegant. They'd always been beautiful. Now they just looked small. The Unchained stood in formation behind Elara, but she'd made them promise not to shift unless absolutely necessary. This was her confrontation, her judgment. They were witnesses and backup, nothing more. Dominic shifted to human form, his transformation smooth and practiced. His scent wafted across the clearing. Forest, embers, ozone, steel. And Elara felt nothing. The mate bond was long gone, severed beyond repair. She'd mourned it, processed it, and moved on. He was just another alpha now. Just another man who'd chosen power over fate. Elara Thorn, he said, his voice carrying across the stones. Or should I call you by your claimed title, the supposed matriarch? He sneered the word. I don't know what game you're playing, hiding in ancient ruins and spreading legends, but it ends tonight. You are a rogue Omega who escaped justice. Submit now, and your death will be quick. Is that what you tell yourself? Elara asked. She didn't move, didn't shift, just stood in human form and let her power radiate naturally. That you dispensed justice? That I was the one in the wrong? You tried to trap me with a false mate bond, he snarled. Tried to force me into accepting an Omega when I deserve. I did nothing, Elara interrupted, her voice sharp. The moon goddess herself chose us. I felt the bond form as much as you did. You could have accepted it. We could have been strong together. But you chose your pride over destiny. And you know what, Dominic? I'm grateful. That stopped him. What? I'm grateful you rejected me, Elara said clearly. Because being your mate would have meant living a lie. It would have meant staying small. You didn't reject me because I was weak, though you've told yourself that lie. You rejected me because on some level, you felt my real power. You smelled it beneath the binding, and it terrified you. You knew that if I ever woke up, you'd lose. So you tried to kill me before I could threaten you. You're insane. But his scent gave him away. Beneath the anger, fear was beginning to bloom. Let me show you what you rejected, Elara said softly. Let me show you what your pride cost you. She shifted. The transformation was instant, fluid, gorgeous. One moment, a small woman in simple clothes. The next, a massive white wolf glowing with internal light, eyes like molten gold, power radiating from her in visible waves that made the air shimmer. The Blackwater wolves stumbled back. Several whimpered. Even Dominic, in human form, took an involuntary step backward. Bow, Elara commanded through the alpha voice, but magnified 1,000-fold. All of you, bow before the matriarch. 23 wolves collapsed instantly, their legs buckling, their heads pressing to the ground in uncontrollable submission. Only Dominic and one other, Vivian, Elara realized, remained standing, and even they were shaking with the effort. Vivian snarled and launched herself at Elara. Aiming for her throat, It was almost pitiful. Alara didn't even need to move. She simply caught Vivian in midair with one massive paw and slammed her to the ground. Hard. The impact cracked stone. Vivian yelped, tried to rise and found she couldn't. Alara held her pinned with minimal effort, her claws resting against Vivian's throat. "You sold me." Alara's voice echoed in every wolf's mind, the mental connection another aspect of matriarch power. "You betrayed your own blood for money. You laughed at my pain. Tell me why I shouldn't end you right now." Vivian couldn't speak, frozen by terror and the command holding her immobile. But Alara didn't need words. She could smell everything. The guilt beneath the fear, the shame Vivian had buried under layers of ambition, the tiny part of her that regretted what she'd done. Alara released her and stepped back. Vivian scrambled away, returning to her human form, naked and shaking and small. Dominic finally found his voice. "What are you?" "What I've always been," Alara said, her voice carrying even in wolf form. "The heir to the true bloodline, the one the prophecy spoke of, the one you tried to destroy because you were afraid of exactly this moment." Behind her, the Unchained shifted. If Alara in her true form was massive and terrifying, the Unchained were apocalyptic. They didn't just become larger wolves. They became something else entirely. Their forms were dire wolves from ancient times, each standing taller at the shoulder than a man's head, their eyes burning with that same silver light, their power so vast it made the earth tremble. 10 legendary warriors, each bound by oath and prophecy, each capable of tearing through an army alone, and all of them standing behind Alara. The Blackwater wolves broke. Whimpers turned to howls of fear. Several simply rolled onto their backs in absolute submission. The scent of terror flooded the clearing. "Mercy," Dominic whispered. Then louder, "Mercy, please!" He dropped to his knees, human and vulnerable and completely undone. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what you were. If I had known, you would have killed me faster," Alara finished. She shifted back to human form, standing before him clothed in power, if not fabric. One of the guards tossed her a cloak, which she wrapped around herself. "Don't lie to me, Dominic. I can smell it when you do." "Then kill me," he said, his voice hollow. "I rejected the matriarch. I tried to have her murdered." "The punishment is death." "Is it?" Alara looked around at the gathered wolves. "That's the law under the current system, isn't it? Death for insulting an alpha. Death for challenging pack hierarchy. Death, death, death. Everything solved through violence and domination." She walked closer to Dominic, her golden eyes boring into his. "I could kill you. Easily. It would even be justice. But I am not the kind of ruler who builds a kingdom on corpses. I am not you." "Then what?" he asked, confused. "You will return to your pack, and you will tell them what you saw here," Alara said. "You will tell them the matriarch has risen, that the old bloodline walks again, that the prophecy is fulfilled. And you will tell them that a new order is coming, one where strength is not measured by who you can dominate, but by who you can protect. Where Omegas are not considered disposable, where power without wisdom is seen as the weakness it truly is." She gestured to her sisters, who stood trembling with the rest of the wolves. "Serena, Vivian, come here." They approached on shaking legs. Up close, they looked so young, so frightened. Alara felt her anger cool slightly. They'd been raised in the same toxic system, taught that power and cruelty were the same thing, that sentiment was weakness. "You sold me," she said quietly. "You betrayed me. You laughed at my suffering, and I will never forget that. But I also won't kill you for it, because that would make me exactly what I'm trying to change. Instead, you're going to live with what you've done. You're going to see me rise, see me build something better. And you're going to know that you could have been part of it if you'd chosen differently." Serena's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ilara. We didn't understand the consequences," Ilara finished. "No, you didn't. But you will now. Go home. Both of you. And if I ever hear that you've harmed another Omega, another wolf weaker than you, another person who can't defend themselves, there will be no mercy. Do you understand?" They nodded, tears streaming down their faces. Ilara turned to address the entire gathering. "I am Ilara, true heir of the Forgotten Bloodline, risen as the prophecy foretold. I claim these territories as sanctuary, all land within 50 miles of the Standing Stones. No violence shall be done here. No wolf shall be forced against their will. Any who are cast out, rejected, or fleeing cruelty can come here and find protection. This is my law, witnessed by the moon and enforced by the Unchained." She let her power pulse outward, felt the land respond, felt the ancient magic woven into the stones, accept her claim. The old order is dying, whether the current alphas accept it or not. You can resist and be swept away, or you can adapt and help build something better. The choice is yours. She looked directly at Dominic. "Go. Tell them what you saw. And Dominic, if you ever cross into my territory with violence in your heart again, I won't give you mercy twice." The war party fled. 25 wolves who'd come expecting an easy kill, running with their tails between their legs, howling their terror to the moon. Dominic was the last to go, casting one final look over his shoulder. Whether regret or lingering fear, Ilara neither knew nor cared. When they were gone, the Unchained surrounded her, shifting back to human form. Kyle stepped close, his scarred face split by a rare, genuine smile. "That," he said with satisfaction, "was perfectly done." Ilara felt the adrenaline drain away, felt her legs start to shake, and suddenly Kyle was there, catching her, holding her up. The chosen bond between them flared warm and strong, and she leaned into his strength gratefully. "I was terrified," she admitted. "You didn't show it." His arms tightened around her. "You were magnificent." Around them, the Unchained bowed as one. "Matriarch," they said in unison, "we pledge our lives, our strength, our loyalty. Today and always." Ilara straightened, feeling their support flow through the pack bonds, feeling the weight of what she'd just claimed settle onto her shoulders. It was heavy. It was frightening. But it was right. "Then let's go home," she said. "We have a new world to build." 3 months after the confrontation at the Standing Stones, the sanctuary was no longer just ancient ruins and a handful of warriors. It was becoming something real. Word had spread, as Ilara knew it would. Omega's fleeing abusive packs arrived weekly. Rogues who'd been cast out for refusing unjust commands came seeking shelter. Even some alphas had appeared, young ones who'd seen the current system's cruelty and wanted to be part of something better. The territory thrived. Not just survived, thrived. The grass grew greener. The prey was abundant. A strange peace had settled over the land. As if the earth itself approved of what Ilara was building. She stood at the highest point of the sanctuary, looking out over the valley as the sun set. Behind her, she heard familiar footsteps. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Kyle. The chosen bond between them had deepened over the months, becoming as natural as breathing. They hadn't named it yet, hadn't made it formal, but everyone knew. The way he looked at her, the way she unconsciously sought his presence, the way their scents had begun to blend when they were close. "Thinking?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. About everything that's changed, Ilara said. 3 months ago, I was dying in the snow, convinced I was worthless. Now I'm... She gestured at the valley, at the people below, at everything she'd become. A queen, Cale said simply. The queen they needed. The queen we waited for. She smiled. I keep expecting to wake up, for this to be a dream. If it is, we're all having it together. He took her hand, his scarred fingers twining with hers. Ilara, I want to say something, and I need you to just listen. Her heart rate picked up. Okay. I've lived for 300 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've known power, glory, battle, and loss. But I've never known peace until you. His silver eyes met her gold ones. You're not just my matriarch. You're not just the fulfillment of prophecy. You're the person I choose every day to stand beside. The one I want to build this new world with. The one I... He paused, vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. The one I love. The chosen bond flared brilliant gold, visible for just a moment, wrapping around them like a physical embrace. Ilara felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears for once. I love you too, she whispered. I didn't think I could after the rejection. I thought that part of me was broken forever. But you showed me that what Dominic destroyed was a lie. This, she gestured between them, this is real. This is chosen. And it's so much better than fate. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and red. The sanctuary land seemed to sing its approval. When they broke apart, Vera's voice called up from below. Stop being romantic and come down here. We have a situation. They exchanged a glance and hurried down the hillside. In the main courtyard, a delegation had arrived. Ilara recognized some of them, alphas from neighboring packs. Their sense sharp with nervousness, but also something else. Hope. The lead alpha, a woman with steel-gray hair and keen eyes, bowed her head in respect. Matriarch. I am Alpha Celeste of the Ironwood Pack. I come with a request and a warning. Speak, Ilara said, sliding into her role naturally. The old families are convening, Celeste said grimly. The powerful alphas who've held control for centuries. They've heard about you, about what you're building here. They see you as a threat to their power structure. They're planning something, an alliance against you. How many? Kyle asked, stepping to Ilara's side. 7 packs, maybe more by the time they meet. Hundreds of wolves. They're calling it a crusade to destroy false prophecies and protect the natural order. Celeste's expression was disgusted. It's really just fear that they'll lose their grip on power. Ilara processed this. She'd known it was coming. Real change was never easy. But hundreds of wolves? Even with the Unchained, even with her power, that was a war. Blood would be spilled. Lives would be lost. And your request? She asked. Let us join you, Celeste said simply. Not all of us are monsters. Some of us became alphas because we wanted to protect our packs, not abuse them. Some of us have been waiting for someone to stand up to the old families. Let us fight with you. Let us help build this new world. Behind her, 3 other alphas nodded agreement. Their scents were honest, their eyes clear. Ilara felt her wolf stir. We accept, her inner voice said confidently. These are true warriors. They will be loyal. Then you're welcome in the sanctuary, Ilara said. All of you. But I want to be clear. If you join us, you accept my authority. You accept that the old ways are ending. You accept that strength without compassion is worthless. Can you do that? Yes, they said in unison. Then let them come, Ilara said, addressing everyone in the courtyard. Let the old families bring their crusade. Let them bring their hundreds of wolves and their outdated laws. We'll show them what true power looks like. Not domination. Unity. Not cruelty. Justice. She raised her voice, letting it carry across the sanctuary. The age of false alphas is ending. The time of the matriarch has begun. And anyone who stands against progress, against mercy, against change, they'll answer to me. A howl went up from the gathered wolves. Fierce and loyal and unafraid. The Unchained joined in, their voices deeper and more resonant. The new alphas added their own calls to the chorus. And finally, Elara herself shifted and threw her head back, releasing a howl that shook the mountains and echoed for miles. A declaration of war, a promise of justice, and a beacon of hope all at once. In packs across the territory, wolves heard that howl and knew. The legends were true. The matriarch had risen, and nothing would ever be the same. And so Elara's journey from rejected Omega to risen matriarch was not an ending, but a beginning. She'd been sold by those who should have loved her. She'd been rejected by the mate fate chose for her. She'd been left to die in the snow, abandoned and broken. But from that death, she had risen, stronger, wiser, more powerful than anyone had imagined. She learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others, but protecting them. That real power came from choice, not fate. That family wasn't always blood. Sometimes, it was 10 legendary warriors who'd waited 3 centuries, or a scarred commander who saw her when she couldn't see herself, or the outcasts and refugees who believed in her vision of something better. The war with the old families would come, blood would be spilled, sacrifices would be made. But Elara was ready. She had learned the most important lesson of all. She was not defined by those who rejected her. She was not limited by those who tried to bind her. She was not broken by those who attempted to kill her. She was the matriarch. She was the storm they feared and the hope they needed. She was the beginning of a new age. And as the blood moon rose on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson, whispering of ancient evils stirring and old threats awakening, Elara stood at the edge of her territory, with Kael at her side and her chosen family behind her, ready for whatever came next. Because she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building, leading, becoming. And her story, the real story, was only just beginning. What did you think of Elara's transformation from rejected Omega to powerful matriarch? Did the confrontation with Alpha Dominic satisfy you? And what about her connection with Kael? Do you think chosen bonds can be stronger than fated mates? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and share it with fellow werewolf romance fans. Your support helps us create more epic tales like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in Elara's saga. Because trust me, the war with the old families is going to be intense, and you won't want to miss what happens when the blood moon rises and ancient evils awaken. Thank you for listening to Elara's story. Her journey from broken to powerful, from rejected to revered, is one that reminds us all that our worth isn't determined by those who can't see our value. Sometimes, being rejected by the wrong person leads us exactly where we need to be. We'll see you in the next chapter, where the true battle begins. Until then, stay wild, stay strong, and remember, you are more than anyone's rejection. You are your own prophecy fulfilled.